What happens when one of Hollywood's most revered actors steps into a seemingly standard interview and unexpectedly finds himself caught in the middle of a showdown? What happened that day went way beyond a typical sit-down with a star. It spiraled into a profoundly awkward television moment that people are still talking about to this day. But before we dive into every cringeworthy detail, be sure to hit the subscribe button and drop us a comment down below sharing the most uncomfortable live TV moment you've ever seen. Because what went down this day puts that in a whole new light. It all started out just like any other stop on a promotional tour. Years in the Hollywood machine have made Crowe an absolute master at the talk show interview, eloquently transitioning from discussions about epic historical blockbusters to intimate character-driven dramas without missing a beat. Sitting down on The View seemed no different. Another opportunity to plug his latest endeavor with the familiar faces of show business. But beneath those plastered smiles, something else entirely was brewing. Joy Behar, with an entirely different plan in mind, had entered the building ready to deviate far from a casual discussion about filmmaking. Backstage, long before Crowe set foot on camera, an unusually electric tension permeated the studio. There was already hushed chatter among production crew members, whispers that Joy was not feeling her usual cheerful vibe. She'd arrived hours before her scheduled appearance and been pacing relentlessly around her dressing room, ranting about how she would make sure this particular interview became one no one would forget. Ratings had been flat the week prior, and there was pressure in the air for show-stopping TV. Always one not shy of controversy, it seems Behar figured she had the perfect captive audience. Seconds later, the studio buzzed as Russell Crowe entered, accompanied by deafening applause from the audience. He walked in with the composed confidence he had worn for decades, giving the excited crowd an easy smile without the slightest clue of what awaited him. Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farah Griffin were all beaming, ready to dive into a conversation about his new film and all the hard work he put into his craft. But one familiar face was not mirroring their glee. With her arms firmly crossed against her chest, Joy Behar stared pointedly at the actor as he sat down. Her expression was cold, almost rehearsed, as if she'd already mapped out the interview's trajectory long before it had even begun. "Russell, welcome back to The View," Whoopi chirped with characteristic warmth. "Tell us all about the new film. It looks magnificent." Crowe settled into his seat, his voice calm as he began recounting the emotional arc of his character. A narrative fraught with months of rigorous preparation, grueling shoots in isolated landscapes, and the sheer personal investment of breathing life into another being. His commanding presence and even tone seemed to capture the entire studio, audience, and crew alike. "The thing that fascinates me about this particular character," Crowe elaborated with genuine enthusiasm, "is that he embodies something that feels increasingly rare in the world today. Honor. The willingness to stand by principle, even at a profound cost. I think people are starving for more stories about real integrity again. And that's where it all began." "Oh please," Behar sneered without preamble, cutting him off with a jarring sarcasm. "Real integrity? Coming from someone whose profession is just to pretend for a living?" The air in the room grew palpably still. "Let's talk about real integrity," she continued in a chilling tone. "Like standing up for the rights of women, not just prancing around as some sort of fearless warrior hero for a movie." An uncomfortable silence permeated the studio. The other co-hosts shared panicked glances with each other. Crowe's smile tightened slightly, his demeanor shifting, though he maintained his professional poise. "I beg your pardon, Joy," he responded calmly. "I'm not sure I follow. Are you suggesting that the members of our industry are not permitted to have opinions on matters of integrity and courage?" Behar did not flinch, leaning forward confidently, as if convinced she had the legendary actor backed into a corner. "What I'm saying is," she fired back, "it's easy to make grand statements about honor and integrity when someone else has penned every word for you. But when there are real issues that call for people with conviction, where's that same courage been in the women's marches?" And the moments that followed would surely test whether the interview could ever truly recover. "Where was your voice on reproductive rights?" she shot. "I wasn't aware it was a prerequisite to pass a political purity test to show up here," Crowe replied, his voice evenly paced and his gaze placid. "I just assumed this was about filmmaking." The argument might have de-escalated then and there. Instead, it ignited. "The whole world is political," Russell, The View co-host, blasted back. "Silence is the political stance. In the words of Defertin Dadaway, Jean Shaheen, you just haven't shown up for that on any issue. Vima farbid sacrifice, vima hul daily eftemoil pro ai moistuan de bleachin palichur wikaman to tupin eshon." Crowe did not falter. His composure at this point seemed otherworldly, a remarkable contrast to Behar's heated delivery. Once there was relative quiet, the 67-year-old actor decided it was his turn. "Joy, I respect your passion in this, but I think you're making an assumption about me personally. which Inst reflected perhaps in reality, he said. Am I? Behar asked, her eyes still glinting fire. Then, prove us wrong. Tell us the causes you've donated money to. Tell us how many times you've stood up against anything at all that really matters to women. From where I'm sitting now, what I am observing is another Hollywood Alistair who thinks that they could just have this ride for free as long as they just don't say anything. The panel grew quiet. Haynes appeared to physically recoil in her seat, while Griffin appeared to scan the room searching for a life raft. At this point, I thought the star would buckle under the intense pressure, yet all of a sudden his even voice turned serious, but remained so controlled. In his eyes I could see it, the switch had been turned on. You know what's ironic, Joy? He'd said, his head tipped almost imperceptibly. You hold that the actual performance of political activism to be more profound than actual action when the world is not watching. With that statement almost instantly, Behar leaned across the table. You have no business doing that, she snapped back. You've spent years and years raising your voice for causes, and you put your reputation on the line. You haven't walked the talk for women. With that, Crowe cracked what appeared to be a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. Or, it is profitable to yell about political issues, because there is a difference between the moral, ethical commitment and performing anger, Crowe hit back. I actually think you can put that into your lexicon for the view. Behar froze in place for 1 second. And in that frozen moment I knew that what Crowe had just done might be even more profound than be a performer on the big screen. Crowe just put the very foundation of every performance she gives into question. How dare you, she spit at the actor. How dare you question my motivations? You do understand what standing up is. I have spent decades standing up for what I believed was right. He leaned back in his chair. His tone, yet still completely controlled, grew slightly sharper and filled the room. Have you? He inquired. Or is it just a good soundbite for a particular audience? Absolute silence fell over the set. I looked to be the only person in the studio to actually see Behar take in air as the blood flooded her cheeks. In the studio's sudden quiet, I think one truth emerged: we'd all been witnessing something no one had expected in today's culture. How dare you ask me that? Behar retaliated. I have put my reputation on the line for everything I've ever said. Crowe smiled fully for the second time, a disarming smile that sent chills down my spine. This was no longer about reproductive rights or the actor's political standings. This was about authenticity and performance. For everyone in the room, what would you call what is done every morning for a segment of time with those millions watching, playing outrage when you can so effectively act your way on television? The actor wondered aloud. All eyes on the table darted to Behar's bewildered expression in that unforgettable moment. Her lips cracked open and then closed. Because of what she had done for years to the acting industry, she said she had been protecting the view, had never looked smaller. Behar, however, wasn't about to be deterred. Years of live television had honed her ability to stretch a confrontation, even a losing one. Don't lecture me about authenticity, she snapped back. Every single day on this show I speak truth to power. I call out hypocrisy the minute I see it, and right now I'm looking at it. Crowe remained cool. Instead of mirroring her temperature, he kicked back in his chair as if all this fire rolling his way was an irrelevancy. Truth to power, Crowe said thoughtfully, the phrase echoing in the air around their hushed table. That is a powerfully compelling phrase. Certainly sounds significant. But tell me, when was the last time you have actually confronted anyone with any real influence? Not an actor peddling a movie has contractually obligated to smile on a television talk show, but someone whose actions will affect your very own life. The question landed in a way none of the others were prepared for. For a fraction of a second, a different woman occupied Behar's face. And everyone around the table felt it too, it being almost painful to watch how easy it was to see their own guest's situation. There was little obligation for these interview subjects not to smile about why the movie on the shelves just behind our shoulders was so important, or how bad Trump is, but hardly any power, whether within Hollywood itself or Washington, finds itself the guest in the hot chair, having their choices questioned. I challenge powerful people all the time, she insisted, although the words didn't drip quite so heavily in assurance now. Do you? Crowe countered at the same calm, steady pace, or do you simply say the thing that makes you look daring in retrospect once the dust has settled and no longer pose any sort of real risk to your own? Because for most, courage involves a price. Silence hung heavy between us, the kind of that has us all ready for whoop is ready save tone to pipe up. So, going back to the film. Before that redirection could occur, however, Behar cut over, but with considerably less bravado now. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, she challenged. You have no idea what my career entails, nor do you understand who I actually am. Then with slow deliberation, Crowe began to pull out his cell phone from his jacket pocket. Actually, he drawled, meeting her gaze levelly. I took a little look at some things. Because frankly, he added, letting the word trail on for a moment, his expression impassive. When you find yourself getting personal about what other people should be saying and doing when you don't know those people, I find it only fair you know who's being questioned. With a deliberate calm, and quite obviously some quick research, the energy immediately shifted around the table, and the room became much smaller. We were in 2022, where all comments, public postings, or perhaps most worryingly public opinion is instantly accessible. Nobody could guess the next moments for anything but fraught intrigue. Will Poeft wote him 1010. What the hell are you doing? Behar asked, her confidence noticeably waning, almost visibly in that single sentence. Crowe tapped on his screen before looking up. I discovered, he responded, his voice devoid of emotion, that you're asking me to publicly comment when there have been moments when critics, and perhaps some of your own peers, have questioned if certain voices within your own industry went far enough to ask the hard questions they were supposed to at time that matters. And that opens an interesting paradox. You're telling me it all depends, he interrupted himself. We all have a context, she conceded quickly. Now. You don't have the context. The context, Crowe echoed before finishing the sentence without interruption. You are talking down to us, yet you insist on using the word context at a critical moment, even though none of us actually knows what is actually happening between you and the audience around all of us here today. The answer was a simple yes. Now silence filled the room. It had always existed around the table, to a degree, but now it was palpable. Our cameras rolled and didn't turn. Our audience sat rapt. Sarah Haynes' attention fixed at the table. Alyssa Farah Griffin looked to the production crew above. They are twisting everything I say, Behar managed through a gritted teeth, and what appears to us now, we're talking. Am I? Crowe answered, your career will be judged. The day when we are on this table will be the day we will be seen the same way that you feel you deserve to live. That day has yet to occur though. Now you have left the building, as I often hear. He didn't say a word. This is just an ambush, Behar said, but the earlier conviction was leaving her quickly. Crowe laughed, not in a mocking way, but the quiet, amazed sound surprised even herself. An ambush? He asked. Joy, as soon as I walked onto this stage, you had already decided what this entire conversation was about. You weren't responding to me, you came ready with that argument pre-written. You didn't so much as acknowledge what I said. Except you just happened to be prepared for a response as well. He paused, letting the comment sink in, and for the first time since the beginning of the interview, it felt like all eyes were suddenly turning to look at her. I don't need to explain anything to you, Behar replied. But her voice contained an echo of uncertainty that few others probably heard. He simply nodded. No, he said. You don't need to explain any explanations to me. But you owe one of sorts to people at home. The reason they tune in, the reason they expect you to be a moral compass, is they think that your principles are consistent, your application is consistent to everything you discuss: justice, fairness, responsibility. Still, Behar didn't speak. Her hands gripped the edge of the table again as she looked past Crowe to her co-hosts in a desperate search for assistance, for a rescue to the interrogation that has spiraled out of control. But nobody offered anything. Nobody said a word. None of them looked like they had been willing participants of a debate, especially one so charged. You're just upset because I put you on defense, she said in a shaky voice that still retained an edge of the conviction Shed felt earlier. Shed finally figured it out now, hadn't she? Crowe regarded her evenly. On defense about what exactly? He asked in the same dispassionate tone. You are attributing to me motives, beliefs, or character, without one actual inquiry into the matter of any one or more of those attributes, and when I give an account of it, you are trying to equate that explanation back to you. Your original premise had been correct. Quite an interesting tactical game. That is just not what happened, Behar insisted, and by then it really was becoming clear not everyone in the audience could see her as the victim in this case. Crowe looked down at his phone one more time, and without a moment's pause, he looked back up to meet her eyes. Well, you know, he said evenly, I see this play out in this exact arena quite often, and even more often on networks all over the country. Somebody expresses disagreement, and instead of taking the opportunity to understand the merits of a point of discussion, the criticism of me is viewed as justification, confirming what someone had already argued out. In the intervening moments, the studio, previously humming with energy, was deathly quiet. Only the constant whir of cameras and the even quieter hiss of broadcast equipment dared break the silence. What should have been a standard promotional interview was transforming in real time into something nobody had seen coming. Looking at the faces around her, Behar finally seemed to realize the dialogue was no longer going the way Shed planned. Shed come armed to win this interview. Now she was being questioned. Let's take a short break, Whoopi offered the words, straining to carry through the palpable tension filling the room. But Crowe cut in. I thought we were having a significant conversation about morality, integrity, and honesty, he explained in a clear but measured voice. And if those are the standards we're using to judge someone's honesty and character, then by all means we will continue the conversation. Or are we now deciding that accountability only applies to one side? The collective inhale in the room felt as audible as a roar. It's funny what an audience of viewers, even more so on a national scale, will see when no one is on stage to perform anymore, and everyone can actually hear what's really being said. For the second time in as many minutes, Behar glanced toward her co-stars, but for the most part, nobody even batted an eye. Whoopi kept to her stance. Sarah studied the notes on her lap, while Alyssa stared fixated at her lap. They all wanted no part of the spectacle, that they knew for a fact that this would become at least as the spotlight was shone back on the woman who had spent years placing every other one of her colleagues in the position of asking. But what could they even do or say? They didn't really ask anything after the initial ambush attempt, so what were they supposed to say? "This is not fair," Behar whispered. There wasn't any anger to the statement, only the raw frustration that bubbled up when you're caught off guard, but with the help of everyone on the show, and now she'd be looking directly at millions of America's eyeballs for everything she did say, or didn't. "It's not," Crowe acknowledged, his gaze softening for a fleeting moment. "Fair," Crowe repeated quietly, allowing the word to hang in the air. "I'm glad you picked it, Joy, because it gives us the opportunity to define what fairness is really all about." A slight nervousness passed over Behar's face. She knew she was being manipulated into something far outside of her comfort zone, and there was absolutely no way out. The camera was still rolling, an audience tuned in, and the silence was becoming oppressive. Crowe's tone stayed measured even in the face of her emotional barrage. "Is it fair?" He began to invite a guest onto a platform for the discussion of their work, and then greet them at the table with an attack on their personal life before asking them a single innocent question. Is it fair to prejudge someone before taking the time to have a frank and honest discussion with them? Is it fair to stand at the moral high ground when simultaneously making assumptions about people you've never met? He stopped, allowing each of his questions to take its rightful place. No one spoke, no one dared to. The room seemed to have ceased breathing. Behar faltered, his calmness chipped away at her persona, her breathing faltering just perceptibly, the studio light doing little to disguise her strained features. Crowe laid his phone carefully on the table. "You mentioned talking about privilege," he stated. "We are actually here to talk about privilege and how we wield it, are we not? Let's talk about having a platform of this size. Having an audience to listen to you. The power to have guests on that we know they have to choose their words carefully for the next 20 minutes lest they provide the quotable of the evening for us. This is all privilege. The question is, how do you use it?" "Stop," Behar said in a hushed voice. He ignored it. "You said you wanted to discuss my activism. I'd actually be very happy to discuss with you what my activism actually consists of off the red carpet and far away from the sound bites that get retweets." He turned his gaze to Behar, his eyes calm and clear. "I support initiatives that bring education to kids who can't otherwise afford it. I donate to charities that rescue women from domestic violence. I've spent time with young performers trying to battle the demons of addiction and their mental health, and I've never felt the need to make public pronouncements about any of it, because to be entirely frank, I never believed a show of kindness needed an audience to become authentic." There was a pause filled only by the audible breathing in the room. "Do you know," Crowe said softly, turning to face Behar, "what separates us? What difference does your passion make if the person standing in your place at the opposite end of the table makes no difference to anything? You believe true passion must be announced to the world. I believe it's far more impactful when done on the sly." He could feel the heat in the room radiating from Behar, but maintained his even tone. Behar opened and closed her mouth. Finally, she managed to splutter. "But that's only because you want everyone to like you." Crowe blinked gently. "If the goal was for me to be universally liked, it would be far easier simply to go away, quietly apologize, take back what I'd said, and look a bit more reasonable," he replied with a faint hint of commiseration for her, the obvious defeat creeping into her expression undeniable. "Frankly, having these sorts of conversations publicly has contributed enormously to the disconnect I feel within the current political sphere, this belief, this need, that everyone must have something in common, in agreement on that particular issue. The people in the audience are all watching this show," Behar continued weakly. "They love this show," Crowe nodded. "Perhaps. Or perhaps we've all been conditioned to equate conflict with insight, conflict with intellect. I think that the public square got very confused some time back about its intended function, and I for one am profoundly saddened to think we can never go back to what it was all originally set up to be." "For all I know," Crowe said softly, "you might have entered this business with pure intentions. You probably came into television expecting that you were going to make some sort of lasting difference, that through genuine dialogue you were going to foster understanding among us. And in an infinitesimal blink I could feel a crack in the wall, Amidst the defiance and the bravado, I could detect a flicker of who the Behar I thought I knew once was, someone who might have believed in the idea over the combat. Crowe's voice had assumed a tone I did not recognize, almost one of resignation. But at some point that got distorted. Winning the argument mattered far more than convincing, beating people up mattered much more than hearing them, and outrage trumped discussion, and slogans trumped the solution, all to destroy the individual who was on the other side of the argument, not just to establish agreement. And just for that beat, or what felt like it, or forever, I was completely stuck. No sound within the studio, beyond the barely discernible buzz of an air conditioner and that beat of silence that the 15,000-plus audience members at the venue felt too. Because for an moment or two, none of them could believe what the Behar heard any more than I could. That the whole exchange of dialogue began at that juncture, that it had escaped. It did not feel at all like a television program anymore. We were all suddenly stakeholders. I was in here to discuss a film, Crowe said then with real sorrow in his voice. A motion picture which is about redemption and finding hope when no hope can be found anywhere, and which expresses the profound belief that everything is capable of going in some wonderful and extraordinary new direction. Not a film which is about trying to tear apart whatever has fallen between us. I hope you, the members of the press, I hope that you will someday think about the direction of our cultural discourse, and what a world would look like in which we value listening to each other and learning from each other over triumphing over and destroying one another. Thank you very much. I remained utterly silent, staring down at the table before me and breathing in deeply through the air in my lungs. Crowe, with far more decorum than anyone might have suspected, slowly rose and adjusted his tie and gave the table a dignified dip of the head to salute me. Joy Behar, Whoopi Goldberg, and the Rev. Eric Shavers, thank you for having me, and I hope those who are tuning in at home this evening that they can take a few seconds just to really think about how important the conversations that we have are, and why that, how important the language we employ is, and that even where people passionately and strongly feel they would like to win, and I thought this was an interview that they wanted to go far, if at some juncture you take your eye off the goal, the real goal of creating a kind of dialogue, a kind of interchange that actually makes you better, then you might find yourselves off the path. And so Crowe simply put back on the jacket, walked off the set of the Wendy Williams show, and out of that space for television. The show itself eventually rolled on, and soon afterward, once commercials off, we were all commercials back yet, despite the cameras moving over us with abandon and with glee. Whether it was a matter of clashing personalities or a public interrogation into alleged crimes, this was a defining moment of television this season, which will surely have long-lasting ramifications not only on television programming in general, but on what each of us chooses to listen to in a cultural sense. So how'd you think of this dramatic exchange? Have you seen such an unusual live television interview unfold before? Take a moment and let me know in the comment section below. And if you'd like to read more stories and unforgettable moments from the world of media and television, then make sure to subscribe. What's the most unforgettable put down you've